Want to know how wealthy multiply their wealth and not pay taxes on that multiplied wealth? MC Laubscher shares his story and the mechanics of how to do it. And by the way, you do not have to make ultra wealthy income to start building that mechanism. It's really fascinating. I actually never thought about what he shared before, and I'm kind of like a finance head, so it was surprising to me that this was very new information to me. Tune in, listen to what he shares, and if you have a little bit of a surplus in income every year and it's not growing truly tax-free and it's not multiplying, talk to this guy. I mean, it's just a wealth of information. Enjoy the show. Google's ability to attract new clients is declining as more people are using ChatGPT. On October 9th, I'm going to do complimentary training where I will show you whether ChatGPT, Gemini, and Perplexity actually recommend your law firm. I will also give you a roadmap to either promote or defend you if you already have solid positions. Sign up for the webinar. The link is down below. Welcome to another wonderful episode of Grow Law Podcast. I have a terrific guest with me today, MC Laubscher. Sure, I butchered your name just a little bit, but I've tried.
No, that was perfect.
Was it? Awesome. So is a guy who knows a lot about a very important subject, which is money. While we still enjoy our freedoms of capitalist society, all of you folks who are law firm owners started your law firms in order, I assume, to make more of it. And hopefully to control more of it so you would have more freedoms in life, because this is ideally what money allows you to do, have more freedom in life. So in this conversation, we're going to talk about MC's story, how he got to where he did. And his story is fascinating, unlike most of our stories. And he will share some tactics and strategies for making and keeping more of your hard-earned dollars. MC, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to our conversation.
Yep. Tell us about your story. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, so I'm originally from South Africa. I grew up during a very interesting time in the country's history. So as a young man, I still remember when Nelson Mandela was released from prison and that the apartheid government relinquished power. There were elections held and he became the president. So there was this whole transition from one form of government to another form of government. And, you know, experiencing that as a young man was very, very, I mean, now I look back at it as a gift, but it was very, very interesting. A lot of observations that I made as a young man helped me to understand people, helped me to understand what happens in times of uncertainty, times when you don't know what's going to happen next. You know, if just telling that story of, we transitioned from one government to another, it's very sanitized, that story, because essentially what happened is you basically flipped everything upside down without a violent revolution. And there wasn't a civil war, but at that stage, nobody knew what was going to happen. No one, regardless of where you grew up in South Africa, what your background is, what your ethnicity is, what language you speak, people didn't know what was coming next. And that led to some irrational behavior. So we're all familiar with the madness of crowds, right? And the studies done on that. But I saw firsthand, I mean, people just started to stock up. They ran into stores and grabbed everything that they could, stocking up with weapons, kind of like prepper and survival stuff. Because people didn't know. They did not know what was coming the next week, what was coming the next month, what's happening the next year. It's also when you cannot see the future, how do you plan for it in times of uncertainty, right? You're like, I just can't see tomorrow or 5 years or 10 years from now. I don't even know what's going to happen next week. And so when I in 2020 saw people ran into stores in the United States and fought each other over toilet paper, I was not surprised at all, because essentially we're all human beings. We all behave the same way in large groups, regardless of what country you're in, right? But you know, that was really a gift as a business owner and an investor. And when it comes to money and protecting money and growing and multiplying money, it was a very, very big gift I got right there, to see what people did in times of uncertainty, unpredictability, volatility, a chaotic environment that were successful and came out ahead, and what people did that actually destroyed themselves and their wealth. I ended up in the United States in 2001 after university. So I finished up university in South Africa, came to the United States. I played in a national rugby league here up until 2007. I was traveling quite a bit, whether it's a bus or a plane, playing sports all over the country. And that's when I just started reading about business, about investing, finance. I eventually got an MBA in finance too. I love that topic. But I was the guy on the team bus or plane that just, got into the books and started reading. And that's why I ran into fascinating books. My mom shared Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki's book with me, and I read that. And that's when really my journey started to take off, because I looked at my situation. I'm like, man, I have a pretty good opportunity here that I don't want to squander, where I can generate some money, pursuing a career in athletics and also doing odd jobs. And I could use that and I can build something to retire to when I'm done playing sports. And what I started to do after 6 months of reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki is I bought my first real estate property, my first investment property. And I remember
What year was this? What year was this?
This was 2001. So I've been an investor for 25 years now that I think about it out loud. But yeah, so I put some tenants in there. I collected rent, paid all the bills, and there was money left over at the end of the month. And I thought to myself, wow, just like the book, cash flow. Mm-hmm. It's the big theme. And I looked at this and said, not only is it cash flow, but you have an asset that is appreciating in value if managed correctly. And then also it has fantastic tax benefits. So very efficient income. And I'm like, well, how many times can I do this? And that's kind of where I started to try to build my real estate business. And it was just that's when the education starts, right? When you have your first success, it's like, oh, not too bad. Well, turns out that sometimes rents don't get paid and people damage properties and all the other things that come along with it. But it was a great start just on my journey. That whole thing of, well, cash flow, besides a return on an investment, is kind of that is the game. And there's other types of cash flow, whether it's managing cash flow and cash flow efficiencies within your own personal and business and investing economy. And I read that Robert Kiyosaki's book every year. I've read it now, what is it, 25 years? Yeah, every year. The third or the fourth time I read it, mm-hmm. I looked at those simplified financial statements in the book. And when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I looked at that and I'm like, wow, there's all these liabilities, and it's great because you can leverage, let's just say, a mortgage loan, buy real estate that eventually acquires an asset for you, right? Because you borrowed the money too, very efficient. There's some leverage involved, and you generate cash flow from it. But it's still a liability on your balance sheet. And I looked at all the liabilities, whether it's automobiles, personal lines of credit, business lines of credit, mortgages. It's all liabilities, but we have double entry bookkeeping. If I have a liability, somebody else has an asset. There's a counterparty. And it just came back to the banks. The bank. And I look at this and I'm like, they really have this figured out. Just think about it this way. Whether you deposit money in a bank, whether you save, whether you spend it, whether you borrow to spend or invest, the banks are making money. It's actually quite genius. It is an incredible system that they've come up with. And I looked at that and I'm like, this is the ball game. The other assets and playing that game, the cash flow game, which funnily enough, Robert Kiyosaki also has a board game called Cash Flow, which is a great way to learn this. But you're just a piece on the board. You're just, who owns the board? Who is the board? It's actually the banks. The banks are the board. And you always want to be the board as opposed to a piece on the board, especially in the game of finance, right? Because all around us today, we have, we all talk about compound interest. And, There's these quotes about Einstein about what it's the eighth wonder of the world. All around us are compound interest equations. And whether you're on the right side or the wrong side actually determines your outcomes financially. So putting yourself on the right side of a compound interest equation really positions you and your family and your business favorably versus the wrong side. And then I ran into the work of just Nelson Nash, who wrote Becoming Your Own Banker. He called himself the discoverer of the infinite banking concept. Nelson was a great mentor of mine, a fantastic, just incredible man. And he just said, I just discovered this. This strategy has existed for 170 years, and it's done in family offices, which is, private wealth management firms of very affluent families. And he just brought it to the general public. At that time, it's funny how things it all just happens at once, right? The universe is incredible, how these things come together. But I had that epiphany in the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I read that. Then I came across Nelson Nash's work. Then I had a lunch with a rugby buddy of mine, and I was introduced to this rugby buddy of mine. They said, well, MC's into real estate. He actually is into real estate too. You guys should talk and hang out. So we did. We grabbed a beer as good rugby buddies do. And he's like, oh, so you like real estate? I said, yeah, I bought property and I'm looking at more. And he's like, oh, so you have actually bought real estate? I said, yes. And, so he at that stage said, they've got a real estate business, a family real estate business on the north side of the city of Chicago, own a ton of multifamily properties. And they're like, they have a business. He said, if you're in town and you're in between traveling and you want to jump in, we'll put you to work in our business. You can learn the multifamily game. And again, Rich Dad, Poor Dad in the book, they teach the rich work to learn. They don't work for the money, right? They don't work for a paycheck. So I'm at that stage. I'm like, absolutely. When I'm in, I'll just jump in. And I started working for him, learning the business from the ground up. I mean, literally started picking up trash on multifamily apartment buildings to eventually doing some maintenance, construction, running construction crews, to doing the leasing of apartments, to eventually managing, I think it was over 500 units I managed at one stage, and then got my broker's license. I learned the business from the ground up. Doing that, I drive past a multifamily building. I could tell you exactly what's going on there on the weekends. I know what's going on during the day, at nighttime and so forth. But we had lunch the one day, and he said to me, he had his CPA, he had his lawyer, he had, and also an insurance person there. And then after lunch, he said, did you understand anything that we discussed? And I'm like, I understand what the lawyer was talking about a little bit. I understand what the CPA, no idea what the insurance guy. And he said, look, we're a third, fourth generation. I think his great-grandfather started the family business. And they had a family office kind of structure. And they had operating business that generate cash flow. And then they would take that cash flow and then they would put that in their own family bank, all the cash flow from the operating businesses. Then they would leverage the family bank, and they've got this whole system built out to buy real estate. And they would just do it over and over. And that's all they did. Operating businesses, generating efficient income through businesses that you own, position it in a family bank, which uses the vehicle of insurance, which is one of the most efficient places to park capital, and then leverage it to buy real estate, which is one of the assets that have stood the test of time for hundreds of years and generations. So I learned that concept of this banking system. And again, I love to learn stuff, and then I like to do it, and I like to teach it. And I started doing that, which, fast forward led me 10 years ago to create a company called Producers Wealth, where we help business owners and investors implement and execute these type of family office advanced banking strategies for their family and their business in all 50 states in the United States. And I started a podcast after having conversations like this with my clients that it was just fascinating what they were doing with business, investing, how they were generating income, how they were growing and scaling businesses. And I started to press record with these conversations. We published it, and all of a sudden it's like millions of downloads in 180 countries. Then that started its own little business, but it's been a ton of fun. And I love sharing and discussing finance and these strategies, and love just continue to love to learn.
Yeah, such an amazing story. Few things that stuck out. First, you talked about the time of calamity, time of great change.
Yep.
Both you and I lived through it on different continents. So I was born in former Soviet Union. When I was a teenager, it collapsed. No more. A country of something 150 million people disintegrated, and it became 15 independent countries.
Yep.
And the economy was upside down, and so many things happened. And some people came out on top, and way more than that went to the bottom. It was really interesting to watch through the prism of someone who, like, when we saw that, one of the things that we talked about, we had already close relatives who lived in the United States, were like, it's not going to end well. It didn't end well. So we were looking to get out. So we left in 1993 when I was 15. So definitely, time of change can be really good for some people, can be really bad for others. And for those who can, it may be time to pack the bags and get out. While getting out is a possibility, because in some countries you do not even have that possibility. But it goes to the point that having assets, even little assets. My parents were not well off. They were not entrepreneurs. They were very Soviet engineers, which is like very, very middle class, which in the former Soviet Union, middle class just meant that you're just as poor as everybody else. But they had enough to pack the bags and to get out. So It's good to have some assets, especially in a time of great calamity. The other thing that you talked about is family business or family office, which is a concept that's not really commonly known.
Yeah.
Especially having a family bank, it's not commonly known. And people who may be listening to this or watching this podcast episode, they may be thinking, well, what does this have to do with me? I am a law firm owner, and maybe I am able to stash away $50,000, $70,000, $100,000 a year into a retirement plan or into a savings account that currently pays 4.3% annual yield or something along those lines. And this guy is talking about generational wealth. Connect the dots. Like, for somebody, a typical Joe who owns a law firm, or a typical Jennifer who owns a law firm, like, what does this mean? Like why is this important for them to know? And how can they implement it in their life to amplify those savings year after year after year after year?
Absolutely. The first thing that I would tell folks when they hear family office strategies and multi-generational and the strategies of the affluent or ultra wealthy, the first thing that I would say is that you do not have to be a Rockefeller to do what the Rockefellers do. You can look at what these families do, because they do the complete opposite of what advice is given to the general public. Look, financial advice that's out there for the general public in mass media, that is just as it states, it's for the general public, right? So it's for the average person. Now, your listeners, I can guarantee you, they're not happy with just being average. They're listening because they're trying to find out other strategies that can enhance their practice and enhance their life, see their business grow and enhance their life of the family. Nobody wants average. We don't want average health. Yeah. We don't want an average marriage. We don't want to be an average father or mother.
Yeah.
We don't want to be an average business owner.
And to add to that,
yep,
the average strategies are what leads to many people having the poor dad lifestyle.
Yes.
That's all there is to it. It's the average, and it's not poverty, but it's not good.
Exactly. It leads to anything, if you're lucky, to 3 hots and a cot for retirement, which is prison. 3 hot meals, a place to sleep, and it's a prison. But that's almost what's marketed to people, right? Why would I make such a statement? Well, because the average advice that people are giving, the advice and the strategies is untested. If you think about the stock market, the average person did not participate in the stock market in the United States until 1980. Why? It was usually for the ultra affluent and ultra wealthy and doctors with a lot of money and lawyers. Just watch the movie, the old Charlie Sheen, Wall Street, Gordon Gekko, Michael Douglas, cold calling all these rich and wealthy doctors. Those were the people that bought stocks back then. So how did the average person get into it? In case I've had several conversations with Ted Benner, that created the first 401k. And it was designed for business owners to maintain and retain employees and actually reduce their salary and get a tax benefit and a tax break. But that all of a sudden, the average person that's never invested in the stock market now through 401ks, boom, they're right in there. And you've had an incredible run in that stock market. If the average person, everybody starts to buy, a Honda Accord car, the prices of Honda Accord cars are going to skyrocket because the demand is so big for it, right? The same thing happened to the stock market. But on the back end, if everybody tries to sell a Honda Accord, like the price it's almost going to be worthless if everybody sells. That's how the system is kind of set up, because you had your baby boomers too, which is the largest generation, all pouring into the stock market at that point. Well, at some stage, all of them are going to pull out, right? But the big thing that I would say to folks is, so what do these ultra wealthy families do that we can use? The average person out there, like, what can we learn? The first thing is, especially if you're a business owner, the first thing is to maintain control of your capital. Always. Think about it when you start, if you're listening to this, when you started your practice, your business, long nights, long days, blood, sweat, and tears, lots of hours away from your family, and eventually, step number one is you just survived. That's the first thing. It's like, okay, so I'm not going to go bankrupt. This is great. Or have to go apply for a job again, right? At that stage too, by the way, you look like a broke person on a financial statement. Any person that's going to look at you will be like, yeah, you look like a broke person, because you're all in. All of your resources are aligned behind your goal. You should look like a broke person.
Because you're broke.
Exactly. You essentially are. And,
that especially applies to law firm owners who often start their law firms while still having 200, 300,000 in the liability column of their balance sheet, meaning it's the student loan.
Right.
While making relatively little money out of the gate. So, yeah, you're broke.
Yeah, absolutely. And then your practice starts to grow. You start to make money. It's profitable. And all of a sudden, you're generating a lot of profit now, and you're doing really, really well. And you get to 500,000, get to $1 million, you're a little bit over there. And now advisors, whether it's CPAs, financial advisors, lawyers, they're banging down your door because you now actually look like an ideal client for them. You didn't when you get started, right? And what's the first thing a financial advisor is going to tell you to do at that point? Well, let's diversify out of your business. Not bad advice, but the execution of it and the tactics is, give me the money and I will invest it for you in index funds, or try to beat the market average, and you just focus on your business. And people would still say, yeah, so what? That sounds fair. Well, what just happened right there? Number one, you lost control of your capital. Number two, you gave it to someone else that you hope knows what to do with it better than you do. And number three, they are investing it in other people's businesses, providing liquidity for other businesses, whether it's through an index fund, an ETF, or direct stock. I love Apple. We're recording this on Apple. I don't need to give Apple, Tim Cook and them, a loan or liquidity to grow their business. My own practice and business needs that, which then leads to the first problem. Now you're out of cash, so you always have to go to a bank, get a line of credit, or you're always fighting that. I almost call it the business owner dilemma, where you're taking out loans and just repaying loans, and taking out loans and repaying loans, and it's just the bank benefiting from that. The second piece is, we all have a cash flow cycle. I call it the 4 seasons of cash flow. Your summer season, every person listening to this, regardless of what type of practice you have, there's a month that you have your highest revenue, traditionally, or maybe 1 or 2 months close together, back to back. And then on the flip side, you have your winter. I call your highest month your summer. The flip side, your lowest revenue months, that's your winter. And then you have your spring and your fall. You need to run your practice through all those seasons. It's very, very easy to run it when a ton of revenue is coming in, and there's a ton of casework or cases that you're working on. Much harder in the winter when there's not a lot of money coming in. So when you're in your highest revenue month, your summer, all of a sudden things start to slow down. And you go into your fall and things slow down even further, and then you're in your winter. Now, number one, you need to manage cash flow, pay bills, pay employees, staff, overheads, all that stuff. But how do you get from the winter to the spring? You need an injection of capital too, whether it's bringing on, a marketing agency that's running ads for your practice, or a marketing campaign, or a book that you're releasing, or a technology that you're incorporating like AI, or an employee that you're hiring. But that gives you that injection, that boost to get you into the spring, which then gathers momentum to get you back into the summer, right? That happens over and over. Now, if you don't have access to capital, you're always stuck going back to the bank and begging for capital and repaying and begging for capital. And then you have your student loans too.
MC, sorry to interrupt. I'm having a little hard time connecting dots. Most law firm owners operate fairly efficiently. They are making money. And for many of them, I know a ton of law firm owners.
Yeah.
There is some surplus of cash. There's usually some surplus of cash, unless you bought a sports car and then a big boat and then got a divorce. Then there is no surplus of cash. Then there's deficit of cash. But for most of them, fairly reasonable people, not a problem. The problem is I am having a surplus of cash. And let's say that surplus of cash is $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 a year. And if I grew up in the era when I grew up, which I was born in the late 70s, to me, long gone are the days when we thought about mutual funds, but today it's 401ks, it's this, that, Bitcoin, other things that I'm seeing other people doing. And often I follow the lead of my broker or my financial advisor, or I follow the herd, which is like Bitcoin, or whatever other shiny object that I will follow. So the question here is, if we think how to really create wealth, like what do we do with that surplus 50, 75, 100, hopefully more than $100,000 a year? Like how do we invest it so it actually multiplies rather than gives us that 4, 5, 10% a year, which is a wonderful interest if you're getting 10%. But it's the average, right? So if you're investing into S&P 500, or as many people refer to the market, and you look at the last 80 years, give or take, you're going to see annualized compound rate of return of about 10%. So you invest 100,000 at the end of year one, you'll have 110. At the end of year two, you'll have 121, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There will be some ups and downs, obviously, but that's average. Like, how do we multiply that to make that pie grow faster than that 4 to 10% a year?
This is where building your own banking system comes in.
What is your own banking system?
Yeah,
what
so
is
you can take that $25 to $50 to $75 to $100,000 per year, and you could structure this infinite banking strategy, which involves the vehicle of insurance. There's other ways you could do the same thing with gold. You could do the same thing with real estate. You could do the same thing with different vehicles. We prefer the insurance vehicle because the first thing that you want is certainty in an uncertain world. So the first thing is you're going to put your capital somewhere where it's guaranteed. It's guaranteed to grow, tax-free. And you can access that at any given point in time to reinvest in the business, buy real estate, buy other alternative assets that is tax efficient and produces great cash flow.
So this is like a whole life insurance that you can borrow against. You have to put in quite a bit of cash into it, and then you can borrow against it.
Yes. So
and then reinvest that money.
This is a dividend-paying whole life insurance policy with a mutual life insurance carrier. Mutual life insurance companies have been around since the mid-1800s. Mm-hmm. They've been profitable every single year and pay dividends to the shareholders, which is the owners of the policies, every single year. Mm-hmm. And it's structured specifically for high cash value. So in your first year, what you put in, let's just say $100,000, you're going to have, let's just say $75,000 to $80,000 in cash value that you can access 30 days from when you set up that policy. Mm-hmm. Inside of your policy right now, the dividends that you're earning is 6% tax-free. And this will compound over time. So this is the vehicle of how you do it. So the money is in there. It's guaranteed to grow. It also has a death benefit that is great for family planning and family contingencies and so forth. Now, why would this fit into a strategy to multiply capital? Because the beauty of this is when you access the capital that's inside of this life insurance policy. You don't access the capital directly, drawing it down. The $80,000 that's there available for you in 30 days, when you access 50, you don't have 30 in your policy. That's not how this works. Take that 80K and place that as collateral for a loan from the life insurance company. And that's at 5%. So you borrow at 5% and then you invest somewhere else, like buying real estate from where your firm operates from, which one of our clients did. Use the money in this policy to buy the real estate from which the business that they own operated. There's 3 or 4 other tenants. They're the anchor tenant, and now they have now they own real estate, right?
So they still have the life insurance.
Yes.
It's still the same value of the life insurance coverage.
Yes.
They're paying that 5% interest that they're paying. Are they paying it to the insurance company, or is it going back into their account?
They're paying it to the insurance company.
Okay.
The money inside of the policy compounds tax-free. Now, again, you can structure this very efficiently. I'll share with you an example. So my company, Producers Wealth, we need a loan because we hired employees this year, and we also brought in some AI. So I took a policy loan. The bank for my family, for my company, is the family bank. So Producers Wealth doesn't go to a bank; it goes to the Laubscher Family Bank. And then from the Laubscher Family Bank, let's just say we borrowed $100,000. The Laubscher Family Bank charged my company 10%. Because if you look at the rates that are being charged out there for loans, I mean, your HELOCs are at 8-9%, right? Yeah. So it's a fair market rate. So what happened is, and we have 12 of these policies in our own family. I eat my own cooking. I've been doing this almost 2 decades. My company borrowed money from the family bank, used the money to our employees, implement and execute AI. We then repaid the Laubscher Family Bank at 10%. On the other side, the Laubscher Family Bank got the loan from the insurance carrier, right?
At 5%.
At 5%.
So there's
gave
still
us
cost
a
of
note
funds.
for 5%. So they're making a spread of 5% right there. And then obviously we're invested in the business. But this is what I call your own banking system, because if you think what happened in that transaction, my business, we're diversifying out of my business by having this banking system. We just haven't lost control of the capital.
Got it.
And markets go up, down, and sideways. If you really look at the rate of return of markets, and I mean, not to get into the weeds, it's not 8% average over the course of it, because you have your years where markets go significantly down and years when they go up, right?
Sure.
So number one, you're diversified. You didn't lose control of your capital. You are now a lender to your business or to your practice, which you have control over all of this. I don't have control over, what Elon Musk is going to say next, or, the next thing they're keying Tesla cars all across the country and, and so forth. So the stock is going down. I don't have control over that. I do have control over my family bank and my business. And that's the two parties involved here. The same thing, you could use this. There's a lot of people that have bought short-term rentals. So, you have your business.
Before we go there, I want to take a minute to recap what you said, to make sure that I understand it and explain it in my own words, which I'm not an expert at what you are. And I think the way that I may explain it may be a little bit easier to digest.
Okay.
So when you talk about a family bank, you're not talking about a depository institution. Nobody's going to come and make a deposit into that bank except for you. Yes. The way that you create a family bank is by buying whole life insurance policies, and you deposit certain funds into those whole life insurance policies. So, for example, if you do have a cash surplus after tax every year, $75,000 that you want to put somewhere, you can put that money into life insurance. By the way, that money is there. It's growing at a healthy rate of return. Most life insurance companies are exceptionally stable companies. The reason why they're so exceptionally stable is, think about everybody who buys life insurance, and then think about everybody who buys with that life insurance policy and that's actually active. You have this many people buying life insurance company policies, and you have this many people actually dying. Because of that, there's so much cash that's being poured into life insurance company. You have to be exceptionally stupid of a CEO of a life insurance company to actually bankrupt your business. It's hard. It's hard. I don't think there are any notable examples of a large, well-established life insurance company that actually goes on, because you have to royally screw up. Even during the times of Great Recession of 2008, 9, 10, 11, during obviously 2020, they didn't fail. They just don't fail because it's a very different business model. There's so much cash flow in and so little cash flow out that they don't fail. So you invest into these ridiculously stable companies that typically do not lose money. Unlike regular insurance companies that, for example, insure homes in my home state of Florida, you lose a lot of money in that insurance business. With life insurance, no. So these are stable companies. You invest money with that. You invest it into something where you can withdraw that money at will, and you borrow against your own asset, which is your life insurance. And you have a product also that if, God forbid, you get hit by a bus, your family gets paid out more than you put in. So there is a significant return on that investment for your family because you kick the bucket. You do not see it, and then they go and they spend it by the yachts and the fast cars and everything else. I'm kidding about that part, but it does happen more often than anyone can imagine. So that's how you create a bank of your own, by putting that surplus into that. And that surplus is more valuable if you invest it into those life insurance policies. Highly likely it's going to be much more valuable than if you were to put it into S&P 500 or a savings account that pays 4.3% or 4% or 3.5%. We're recording this middle of 2025 when a lot of savings accounts will pay sub 4%, give or take. So you create this bank which you can borrow against if you want to. And if you don't want to borrow, your investment will continue growing and you can take it out at any time at a lower borrowing rate than you can get anywhere else, because you can borrow money against your life insurance today at 5% annual rate. Whereas if you want to get a mortgage on your otherwise mortgage-free property today, you'd be paying close to 7% or 7.5%. So it's cheaper cost of money. Did I get it right?
You did. That's
cool.
A very good way of stating it. And I will just say this, that everything that you've heard from Dave Ramsey about life insurance too, I agree with.
I never listened to Dave Ramsey, but I know who he is.
Yes. So he has been very, very hard on life insurance because he's talking about retail life insurance. How we're talking about it is how it's structured in family offices. So where he said it's a terrible place to put your money, the agents are making a lot of money, all this kind of stuff, I agree with him. That's retail insurance. How it's structured in the family offices, it is one of the best place to put your money, and that's why family offices and families buy as much life insurance as they possibly can, because
what's the difference between wholesale and retail, or family office and retail?
Retail is just structured for the death benefit only, purely for the death benefit. It's not maximized for cash value, for the savings component of this, and therefore it's not a great vehicle as it's structured in the retail market, how the majority of people, the average person, buys it over a long period of time. Where how do the ultra affluent and ultra wealthy buy it? Well, they buy it as a vehicle to store and warehouse cash. It's one of the most efficient places to do that, because once the money is in there, you never pay taxes on it again. You know, if you look at more advanced strategies, what the Rockefellers do, they call it the waterfall method. They buy life insurance on all the family members immediately. It's part of the trust planning too. So let's just say you listening to this, you have a spouse, and the two of you set this banking system up. And let's just say you have death benefit of on your policies of $5 million each. So there's $10 million. You both pass away. Now $10 million fall to your children. And let's just say you had two other children.
Tax-free.
Tax-free.
By the way, unlike your business, if you sell it, you're going to pay 20, 30, 33% on that sale.
Absolutely. Now the children...
Interesting in 401k, etc. Like whenever it gets inherited, there's probably going to be a tax. Or if you sell it, there's definitely going to be a tax. Or if you start cashing into your 401k, there's definitely going to be a tax.
Think about your brokerage account.
That's not true, actually. With the big, beautiful bill, I believe that there's no longer taxation on retirement income up to a certain level. I think it's like $75,000 a year.
Yep. So then that $10 million fall tax-free to the children.
Yeah.
In a trust, you can set this up that they buy life insurance on themselves and max it out with the $10 million that they just received. And now they still have their bank. They can go and access the capital through policy loans, pay it back access it, pay it back, just as the bank, the two families. Now let's just say the children starts to pass away, and that 10 million is now probably 30 million is all their death benefit on them. The 30 million falls then through proper structuring, obviously, with trust planning, tax-free to the grandchildren. And that 30 can turn into 90 to the great-grandchildren. So there's a water.
Nobody thinks about those people.
No, and it's actually, you know what, one of the biggest lessons that I've learned on my journey is how when you think long term and you have a very long term horizon in planning, and you plan for the next 100 years, even though you're not going to be alive, you're going to have much more certainty, much more stability, much more clarity, and your results, you're just going to stay on track. I mean, and this is just a lesson that I learned from, someone like a Jim Rogers, legendary investor, where he said to me, he said, MC, if you can only make 10 investments in your entire life, and it has to be for the next 100 years, what would you invest in? And I paused for a second, and he goes, besides yourself, growing yourself, besides your family, and besides your operating business, what else? We're talking now, let's talk. Is it real estate? What is it? And I said to him, I said, Mr. Rogers, this is why you're in commodities. He goes, exactly. Food, commodities, all this stuff. It's going to be around for another 100 years. He said it's going to be around for 200, 300, 400, 500 years. People are still going to make bread. They're still going to, plant stuff and harvest stuff and sell stuff and trade stuff. Commodities are not going anywhere. So that was fascinating. And then it's the same thing if you think about the philosophy of planting trees that you will never get to sit in the shade of. That's how, if you think from multi-generational planning. Now, and if you're thinking about this, I don't really care about that. You started. And even while you're alive, creating this banking system, number one, you diversified from your practice. You have control of your capital. You now have a law practice and you have a banking system. Now you leverage that banking system to buy real estate, buy other assets, and it's all flowing through the system. It's the same thing that friend of mine taught me 25 years ago. He's like, MC, we keep it simple. We have an operating business that generates cash. We put it in our family bank, and then we leverage that to buy real estate. We do it over and over and over. Remember, your bank makes money whether you save, spend, whether you borrow to spend or invest, they make money. This system, if you structure it correctly, allows you to do the same thing. Our family makes money when we save money in our family bank. If we spend it, it's done through this collateral strategy that we borrow from our family bank. So we never, ever, ever interrupt that compound tax-free growth that is happening in the policies. Whether we borrow money to spend, whether we borrow it to invest, the banking system that we've set up still generates a profit. So it's something that is based on efficiency. Back to your other point, well, compare this to just buying an index fund or just buying an ETF. Think about it this way. How many places is the same pool of money working simultaneously for you when you have the system? No. When you have a banking system, $100,000 is growing tax-free, getting 6% dividends. Then you borrow against it. It's in your business. You can borrow. It's in real estate. It just keeps going on, and your business has tax benefits for reinvesting in it and paying it back to your banking system. The real estate is tax benefits, so you can make more money every year and grow your wealth and pay less taxes. Remember at the beginning of the conversation, I said there's these compound interest equations all around us. One of the biggest one that nobody talks about is taxes. It compounds against you. If your tax rate is, let's just say 25% for simple math, every single year you pay that. 25% of your income over the course of, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, 40 years, what does that look like? It's ugly. It actually makes me nauseous to think about it.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pretty good with math, not excellent, but pretty good. So let's think about it this way. You make $400,000 a year, and you pay $100,000 in taxes on that. So 100,000 at a compounded rate of 10% per year in 10 years will be roughly $1.6 million. But that's every year that you pay that $100,000. So that cash outflow, that everyone has to participate in to a certain degree unless you stop actually making money. You have to literally stop making money. If you're making money, you will participate in it. This will be the greatest expense then you will have unless you get divorced. Then you're going to
That's
have a
true.
really terrible financial. If you have assets, that's going
Yes.
to be the biggest one-time expense that you're going to have. But aside from getting divorced, while with assets, this will be the greatest expense that you will, not your home, not your cars, not your vacations, not your kids' college. The greatest expense you will ever have is the taxes that you pay our dear government.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And forgive me, MC, let me try to explain how this avoids some of the taxation. So you go to your private bank and you borrow money from that bank instead of borrowing somewhere else, and you pay yourself when you make money on that money, because you're not borrow that money to buy a boat, you borrow that money to invest into another business. And when you make payments back on that loan, you're going to pay yourself interest back. So you're paying the insurance company 5%, but you pay yourself 10% back. You do not get to pay interest on that 5% like ever, right? You never get to pay interest on that. Did I get that right?
yeah, and that spread, I mean, compounds too. And it's part of just directing more money flows into your pool of money. Because that's the big thing too. Think about all the inefficiencies. When you have like this banking system, I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Think of all the money leaks that you have, cash flow leaks, as I call them. One of the biggest cash flow leaks that people have, especially practice owners and business owners, is health insurance. Try to buy in your state. I mean, I get nauseous when I think about it. Just proper health insurance for you and your family. You know, we're a family of four. It's nauseating. I think the one quote that they came up with for us was like, let's just for round numbers, $3,000. So what we did is we took the highest deductible plan at $1,000. Right, we're a fairly healthy family. That's $2,000 a month every month. That instead of we're paying the health insurance company, we're just redirecting that cash into our own banking system. And we've been doing this now for.
So you didn't get health insurance?
No, we did. We had the highest deductible plan for
Okay.
$1,000, but instead of paying three, we're paying 1,000. But
Okay.
you know,
The spread or the difference, the 2,000, you're just putting it back into your family bank.
exactly,
It's your savings plan. Got it.
exactly, and that's been happening for 10 years, over 10 years. Let's just say it's a little bit over, but let's just say 10 years. That's $240,000 that we've directed into our family bank instead of paying that to a health insurance company.
What if
Because
you would have invested that $2,000 a month, every month for the last 10 years into S&P 500? I keep on referring to S&P 500 because it's kind of like the main thing out there. This is the market.
Yes. We've directed that into our pool, paid off all of my wife's student loans. We have invested in we've built up a very large multifamily portfolio just from that pool. We have invested in other businesses, three of which are resorts.
So what you're saying is you invested money into life insurance and then you borrowed from that portfolio or from that bank and you put it into those assets.
That's correct. So the money went into the insurance. It's guaranteed to grow tax-free. And then it was leveraged to buy real estate that generates cash flow, reduces taxes, and so forth.
But when you invested that money was after tax. So first you made the money, you paid the tax on it, and then you invested into it. Okay.
Yep.
Which would have had a higher yield if you just parked the money in your life insurance or actually putting it in the S&P 500 for the last 10 years?
It all depends. It depends when you're coming in. If you had to run the math, S&P, you'd probably be up in the S&P. But the point that I'm making is that the life insurance is a savings vehicle, whether the S&P is an investment vehicle.
Yeah.
So I put it into savings, and then I go and invest with it. Now, if I to compare the returns from the real estate, the resorts, oil and gas, and then my own business, and businesses that we're invested in, I mean, there's no comparison. You know, this is, by the way, the other thing that I always talk to business owners and practice owners about, that there's no other vehicle outside of your own business that can ever match the return.
Yeah.
It's just it's impossible. If you take 100,000 invested in the S&P and just let it sit there, or invest that in your practice, I guarantee you, for 99 out of 100, unless you're doing it wrong, you're going to have much bigger returns in your own business than in the S&P, and you're going to have
Highly
more
likely.
control, better
True.
tax efficiency, and all the other ancillary benefits.
True. There's another ancillary benefit for those who are in partnerships. So if you own a law firm and you have a partner, which most law firms are partnerships of sorts,
Yep.
you can set up a buy-sell agreement, which many of you probably do,
Yep.
and say that in case of your partner's passing, there is an insurance policy that's going to pay off their family this much money, however much you're insured for, et cetera, et cetera. You can set up those policies. They're reciprocal policies. This partner has a policy, that partner has a policy. And you can set up policies which will be operating kind of like this bank, all within the business, and pay for those policies with your business funds, pre-tax, because that is allowed. As far as I know, I'm not a tax strategist, but as far as I know, like my partner and I, we do have insurance taken out on each other in case of one of us passing away and the other one not having the means to pay off the family of the surviving partner. So it's already there. It would have been an expense, but you're making it into an asset.
That's correct.
That's really interesting.
The other thing too that might be of something to think about for practice owners is recruiting and maintaining and keeping top talent. I don't care what business you have. That's always a challenge, right? An A player joins your team. So how do you keep them? Well, life insurance is a fantastic strategy of how to do that. That's how they recruit a lot of CEOs, by the way. They give them stock options based on performance. And then they would put a certain amount, if they hit their targets, a certain amount of money every year in a policy. And if they stay for, let's just say, 10 years, they walk away with, the money in that policy tax-free.
Yep.
You could structure it where $100,000 goes into a policy per year if they meet their targets and performance targets. And if they stay with you for 10 years, there's like, $1.2 million tax-free in that policy that they can then choose to then walk away, or they could, structure something similar. But if they leave before that, you keep obviously the policy, and then you have maintained control of the policy. So it's a great way to structure incentives, which is fair and really motivating for both, for everybody involved, right? The employee and the practice owner.
Yeah, for more sophisticated folks, it's a really, really very alluring option. For most others, it wouldn't be. But it is really a fascinating way to save and multiply your funds.
Yep.
Because you're doing it tax-free. That's probably the most alluring thing about it. And ultra wealthy, one of the ways to get there is to legally and ethically avoid taxation for as long as possible. And the best example, you mentioned Elon Musk before. The best example is how he was paid by Tesla for so many years.
Yep.
He did not get paid. He simply did not get paid. He operated for stocks. So a simple example, he was granted certain number of stocks upon performance. If he reached certain performance, he would be given that many millions of shares. Those shares were valuable because stocks were already publicly traded. And he would go to a bank, a financial institution. I would be like, listen, my stocks currently is worth $500 million. My living expenses are a couple $1 million a year. Lend me some money against my $500 million stock portfolio. And banks would gladly lend him money for an extended period of time. And they knew that they would be getting paid. And Musk, when he would get that loan, guess how much income tax you have to pay on a loan? How about the perfect zero effing percent? No tax. So while you and everybody else on our active income, we may be paying 25, 30, 35, 37%, he paid zero, which made his living expenses, because to me, a tax is a living expense. It's one of your living expenses. Like your life, you're making money, you're paying taxes. Yep. Because for most of us, especially if you make good money, this is going to be your greatest expense. So this allows you to amplify your money tax-free, but it's already on the earned income. So first you have to earn it. So you pay tax first, but then you amplify your money in the fascinating stuff. I think a lot of people, as they listen to it, their gears started turning inside their heads, and they're like, This is interesting. I do have that surplus of 50, 7,500, or hopefully more than $100,000 a year. MC, how do they connect with you and get more of their questions answered? Because we kind of scratched the surface, but there's so much more to it.
Absolutely. Just a fun fact before I share that, and thank you for allowing me to, is Elon also bought Twitter through this exact same strategy. He
Yep.
borrowed against his Tesla shares to put the down payment for Twitter, and then the investments bank came in, just like what you're doing with your life insurance. So your listeners can go to getwealthyforsure.com.
I love it. Get wealthy for sure.
.com. Yeah. I actually have a book called Get Wealthy for Sure. And it's the subtitle is the number one financial strategy to multiply for business owners to multiply wealth predictably. And it's funny how people said, well, how can you make such a statement? Like, what's the track record of the strategy? I said, well, about 170 years. So it's a pretty good one.
Pretty good.
Yeah. GetWealthyForSure.com is where they can go to. When they go there, they can request a copy of the book, Get Wealthy for Sure. They can get a PDF or just a paperback. Just pay for shipping. We'll ship it out to you. And there's also a link there to case studies and actual like strategies and policies to show you what these look like and how to manage these. And then also there's a link that you can schedule a call with myself and my team just to explore options for yourself and your family, just to make sure, just to see if this would work for you and for what you're looking to accomplish.
MC, such a pleasure to listen to you, man. This is a great advice there. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on.